Welcome back. It's been a little while, huh?
Yeah, it feels like
Let's see. We've had a couple weeks off. Couple
Have
weeks.
we?
Well, almost a couple weeks.
It feels like, yeah, we've had things come up and sick kids and all that fun stuff.
Life sort of gets in the way, right?
Doesn't it? Yeah, it's so rude.
Yeah. But I'm really excited to be here. And so before we start though on the topic, I wanted to respond to a commenter.
Okay.
We have had such great feedback.
Yes,
from,
we have.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
so great.
We've had so much good feedback and I'm loving it. Like, that makes me happy that people are resonating with our stories.
Absolutely.
And like loving, liking what we're saying and all of that. And so that's been fun. Now, this was a little bit different comment and I wanted to respond to it. Okay. So this is somebody named David. And he listened to our episode number 5 that we talked about the church being a little bit culty.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he said. He said, I'm starting to feel alone in trying to make the church a healthier space for everyone else. Church isn't as bad as you guys make it sound. I still enjoy being active. I suppose church is healthier when you recognize its unhealthy aspects and are able to avoid it. So, David, total, complete honesty here. I agree with you that church isn't as bad as we make it sound. At least when I was in the church, when I was in your position, I felt the same way as you, David. David?
Yeah, you can relate.
That's what always makes me think. Sorry. I'm always going to be on Schitt's Creek.
I love it.
I enjoyed being active.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I loved the church. And your first comment about feeling alone, trying to make the church a healthier space for everyone. That resonates with me
and thank you
so much. And thank you.
We need more people that are right doing what he's doing.
We need people like David. I suspect, that it will always be hard to make the church a healthier space because you basically have all the leadership working against you.
Well,
and it's very difficult.
Yes, when I think back to going to church every Sunday, I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my community. That's where I made friends. That's where I nurtured friendships and, got to meet my neighbors. And I liked Sunday church.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all the other aspects that are required of you to maintain a membership, like to the temple. Yeah. That's what really started getting to me. It's the people we exclude. It's you have to pay 10% to get into the temple. It's, you're buying so I can see where he's saying church is not, I get it. Church is not bad. I mean, I had great experiences going to church. It's the leadership and the rules that are put on us and the culture, the toxic culture part. It's not it's not all bad, but there's enough that it's harming people.
Yes. And I was totally in that space of trying to make the church a healthier space.
You were.
For actually years and years. And I didn't even fully recognize that that's what I was doing. But for many years, I, in my head, was saying, I'm a progressive Mormon. I don't even think I named it that, actually. No. I don't think I used that term. I now look back at it that way. But at the time, I was just like, I'm the person who's going to speak up and talk about the hard things and make everyone feel welcome. I really felt like I served in the Young Women's Organization, like one of my last callings for a bunch of years because I went into different callings in the Young Women's. But I was constantly trying to reassure those girls that God loved them unconditionally, that their worth was infinite, and that it would not change no matter what they did. Those were the kind of things that I was trying to plant those seeds instead of the opposite ones, that some of the messages that I got as a youth, right?
Right.
And when my daughter came out as gay, that was another huge thing for me to try and speak up for the LGBTQ community. I would wear this tiny little rainbow pin on my jackets or whatever at church. And just to kind of make people feel like I was a safe person and that space with me was safe and that they would feel that from me. I don't know if that made any difference to anybody, but I felt like that's where I wanted to be. And so I totally understand what he's saying. And also I did not see a lot of the toxicity. So now that I'm out, I can see the very small, almost like insidious ways that we are indoctrinated and that we think we're making our own choices.
Right.
We think we are empowered. We think we have free agency, and we think that we're doing good, and that somehow we don't see a lot of the toxic things. So yes, I agree that we make it sound, now that we're out and we're talking about the church being culty, we probably are being extra hard on the church. But from our perspective, that's what it is. Unfortunately, that's what we see now. Now, when we were in your space, we didn't feel this way. We, in a lot of ways, we felt that church was great, and I felt the Spirit, and I felt good, and all the things. So yeah, when you get out, you start to recognize more of the unhealthy,
you see
right?
things from a different perspective.
Yes.
But the people in my ward, I miss a lot of seeing them. That was my community.
Yep, me too.
And they're such good people. The church is made up of really good people.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that I used to say all the time is how, it's just the church culture. It's not the doctrine. Well, what I learned is that the culture is not created in a vacuum.
Right.
The culture is there as a direct result of the doctrine.
Yes.
So we cannot separate the two.
Mm-mm.
I always tried to separate the two because it made me feel better.
Yes.
It was like, the church is true, the culture is hard. Right?
It's impossible.
It's not true, though.
Yeah.
They are so interconnected. They are the same thing. The doctrine creates the culture.
Yes.
So that's what I struggle with, is when people, I know that that's the way it seems, that, it's just, some toxic culture and the people, and I'm going to fix that. Well, until the doctrine changes, the culture can't change.
Right.
And I think the doctrine is softening. I mean, literally every doctrine there ever was in the church has changed, even though people don't think that it has.
Right.
People will claim the doctrine never changes.
But
every single doctrine, almost, that I can think of, that we've ever had has changed.
There's been
over
some
time.
adjustments,
it has
some
shifted.
changes, yes.
And I do think the church is taking a softer stance on certain things and such and such. But until the doctrine completely changes, and it's almost like the doctrine has to change, and then a whole generation of people has to die, right? Because we're living in a church that's led by people who were raised in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, like in that generation, right? The prophet, dude, they're in their 90s, the leaders of the church.
So true.
So it's almost like we're living in old doctrine, even though, millennials and Gen Zers, and even us, even our generation, is feeling totally different. I think we've come a long ways.
I do too.
Right?
I do
Since
too.
the 50s and 60s.
Yes, for sure.
So anyways, that's what I wanted to say to him. I really appreciate his comment, because it made me think, sometimes it's hard now that we're out and we see all this stuff and we talk this way, and it maybe sounds like we aren't sensitive to the people who are in and how they feel.
I'm sure.
But I can promise you that we do understand it.
Right.
Like, we were there.
Mm-hmm.
We felt the same way. We went through that, and we understand it.
And it's not like I don't even think like the prophet and the quorum of the 12, they're not bad people.
Yeah.
But they've got their heels dug in.
Yes.
In the name of God, that we have to do certain things, or we're not going to be able to make it back to him. And one of those things they've really dug their heels in is the LGBTQ community. They have really dug their heels in.
Yeah.
That's not, we will tolerate you, but that's where it ends. Like, you can't have the same blessings that the rest of us receive. You can't have a family. You can't raise children. No. You got to get through this life, celibate, to make it to the next life, and then you'll be Then you'll be given all the blessings. Yeah, all the blessings, yes.
For all your sacrifice. The thing that's the saddest to me is thinking about, after this life, when they realize that none of that was true, they gave up their one precious life.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are going to talk about I want to go through like a whole timeline of events in the church relating to the LGBTQ issues, because so the church's stance on LGBTQ things was, as I've said before, like probably my biggest shelf item.
Mine too.
And I didn't know that it was a shelf item as long ago as it was. But as I've like reflected on the past, I remember clear back probably 20 years ago when maybe some of the first issues were popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying, that doesn't feel quite right. Why shouldn't gay people have the same rights as straight people? Like, they love each other the same as straight people. I remember when the issues of like insurance and like medical care and things like that.
They were fighting to get those
they were saying,
benefits as everyone else.
Exactly. And like the laws were trying to say that like a gay person who's, in a hospital, unable to care for themselves, that their spouse or their significant other couldn't care for them because they weren't legally married. Right. Or, things like that. So I remember way back then starting those little teeny thoughts in my head where I thought, well, that doesn't seem fair, and literally from the time, I swear, from the time I was as young as I can remember, I started saying, that's not fair. And my dad would always say to me, well, life's not fair. Right. And I'm like, no, that's not okay. Yeah. That's not okay with me. Mm-hmm. So I think I literally was just born with this social justice warrior in me.
Yes.
Where like I cared about fairness and equity for everybody. I just always did.
As long as I've known you, you've had that in you. That is just part of you.
Yeah. And I didn't even know what it meant really fully.
Yeah.
But I recognized unfairness when I saw it, and I was like, that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to fix it. Yeah. And from the time I was pretty young, I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to fix it. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that lawyers couldn't fix it either.
No.
It felt hopeless to me, So anyways, okay. So sorry, enough of that. But I did want to go and kind of go through a timeline, because one of the things that I learned as my shelf was kind of breaking about this is that one of the things that really made it crumble is to see like all the mistakes that they've made and all of the wrong thinking they had. And what that did to me was it made me think that they didn't really speak for God.
Well, that's the whole thing, is follow the prophet. They'll never lead you astray.
Yeah. Yeah.
They never make mistakes. Yeah. Everything they say is coming straight from God.
Yes.
So keep that in mind while we go over this.
Yeah. And that's exactly why my shelf broke, essentially. Because once the authority of the church kind of crumbles and you go, there's no way they could be speaking for God, then everything else crumbles, right?
Yeah.
So they have been, one of the things that they have done is they've just been involved in so much legislation relating to LGBT people and their rights. So housing, job discrimination, same-sex marriage, all of that, right? So they have played an important role in defeating same-sex marriage legalization. Well, of course, before it was federally legal.
Right.
But so starting back in the probably 1990, they have stated that, or they stated at that time, that they will become involved in any political matter if they perceive that there's a moral issue at stake that influences the people in the church.
They would come out and say that gay marriage threatens
Exactly.
the institution of marriage, right?
I have so many quotes. I won't share them all, but yes. So, I tried to go back in time and find as many early things as I could. But starting as early as 1991, the young men's, it's the general young men's president. And he was a member of the 70, Jack Gosland, I think is how you pronounce his name. He made a statement that the church would withdraw from the Boy Scouts of America because they were trying to decide whether, or the Boy Scouts of America were trying to decide whether they would allow homosexual youth to participate.
I remember this.
And the church said, we will withdraw.
And they're their biggest,
yes.
The church was their biggest what?
Supporter, like financially.
Financially, yes.
So that was clear back in 91.
So they're manipulating the Boy Scouts to get what they want through money.
And they've been fighting the Boy Scouts for that long, like trying not to allow them to have gay youth. And then later you'll see it came in with gay leaders and stuff like that. So they started to really focus their attention on fighting same-sex marriage in the early 90s. A lot of their quotes and things that you can find just push fear tactics, saying that allowing gay marriage would break down the fabric of society.
Right. Yes. Fear. They're planting fear.
They planted fear.
And I
big
felt
time.
it.
Yep.
Yes.
I remembered it.
Yes.
I remembered thinking, oh my gosh, what is our world going to look like?
Exactly. Well,
because they made it sound so terrible.
Did you feel like you were in a war? Like, yes. I felt like this is the battle that we have to win.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is a battle. I mean, I laughed because that made me think of President Holland saying we need some more musket fire.
Right.
Right?
Bring
Not
out the
President,
guns.
Elder Holland.
Anyways, I just call him Mr.
Yeah.
They don't hold any.
Jeffrey. I'm just going to call him by his first name. Yeah. Jeff. Okay, so in 1993, the Supreme Court of Hawaii said that discrimination against same-sex couples in the granting of marriage licenses violated the Hawaiian Constitution. So in response, the church's first presidency issued a statement declaring their opposition to same-sex marriage and urging members to support efforts to outlaw it. They recruited members to work with and donate to this cause. They even handed out pamphlets. They were spread at church meetings, and church facilities were used to fax statements to legislative committees. The campaign spanned years, and the church reported giving $600,000 to the Hawaiian political action group Save Traditional Marriage. Okay, this went on from like 1993 to 1998.
Mm-hmm.
It was multiple legislative
and
committees.
They're using the members,
yes,
in the name of God, and they're saying we've got to defeat this, or life as we know it is going to be destroyed.
Exactly. And I mean, these fundraising assignments, this was the earliest case I could find, 1993. Okay. There may have been earlier ones, but this was the earliest one I could find about same-sex marriage, right? There may have been things that they were involved in politically before that, but I mean, they were given fundraising assignments to stake presidents, like saying your ward or your stake needs to raise this much money.
But do you think it's not about the money?
No.
It's about keeping them occupied, busy, keep your eye on the prize.
Yes.
Keeping them,
keeping them on the same, like in the same camp, like keeping their thoughts, like, and their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their like loyalties towards this one issue, right? Okay, so during that time when they were fighting this, the church came out with the proclamation to the world. And it's the Family Proclamation. This was in the Fall General Conference in 1995.
This was a big deal.
Yes, this was a huge deal. Now, I remember at the time not thinking it was a big deal. I was like, this is stuff that we already know, like hearing the proclamation, right? But I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know what was behind all of it because I didn't know what was going on politically in the world. I didn't know that in different areas of the world, they were fighting for gay rights and gay marriage.
We were still like,
I had just graduated from high school.
Yeah, teenagers. Yeah.
So I was unaware, but I think it's a little bit interesting that the Family Proclamation document has been submitted by the church in several amicus briefs as evidence against legalizing same-sex marriage.
I didn't know that.
Yes. There is a lot of speculation about the fact that the proclamation was more than likely written by the church lawyers, not revelation.
Well, it's not Doctrine.
Right.
It was never canonized, right? Or was it?
I believe so, but there's confusion about that.
I think it was for a moment, and then they took it away, if I remember right. I should look that up. But, but as of today, it is not official doctrine of the church.
I think you're right, but I also think that they leave a gray area so that people think that it's doctrine, even though they haven't come out and said.
It's like when a prophet or a higher up elder speaks in general conference and says, you shouldn't watch rated R movies, or don't get the second ear piercing or whatever. It's not doctrine, but it's coming from these, you should probably do it,
When recently though, I had somebody say to me that the proclamation was like the entire doctrine of the church, essentially. And she used that word doctrine.
Oh, really?
And I was just like, wow. So
that's strong.
That's what she believes. Yeah. And I don't think that's a unique belief. I think that many members of the church really take that as like our core.
That's it. Yes.
Our core belief.
Yes. Well, and how many people have that hanging up in their home?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Every member,
so
active member I know has that hanging up in their home.
Yeah. And it's really sad to me because, well, first of all, President Hinckley read this at the women's session of General Conference. Is it just called the women's session?
General women's session.
Yeah, General Women's Session. Yeah. And there was quotes by some of the women general leadership after the fact that said, we had no say in this. They did not even ask for our opinion whatsoever. We had an entire general session planned out that was about inclusion and equality for all. And then the prophet comes in and says, nope, change the whole thing for conference. I've got this thing that I've got to talk about, and I've got to read this proclamation that talks about gender roles and how this is the only way to have a marriage and is a man and a woman and blah, 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 right?
It's true. There were no women at the table when this was written. And they've come out, these women at the time have come out and said in the nicest way possible,
yes,
we didn't have any say in this.
And we were not even consulted.
No, they heard it when everyone else heard it.
They heard it when everyone else heard it. Right. And yeah.
And it definitely puts women in their place.
It definitely
just reinforces that women are supposed to stay home, have babies, nurture, and that the men are supposed to go out, work, support, and that's it.
Yeah.
Black and white.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is how they roll out they make this big grand gesture of the family, a proclamation to the world, and they make it seem like it was this big revelation that the prophet received, when in actuality, lawyers for the church were drafting this document to use in several amicus briefs for legalizing same-sex marriage. So
I'm sure the lawyers said a prayer before they wrote it up.
Right?
It's ridiculous.
They probably did. But also what I think is interesting is there's a large number of lawyers in the leadership of the church. They love to have, lawyers as leaders in the church. So anyways, that's it's somewhat of a speculation, but I don't know if it's been proven that that's how that came about, but it's a little too convenient.
Well, it's just sad. If you read that and you're a single parent, what is that? You don't fit the mold now. So Where does that leave you? Where does that leave people that don't fit the mold, that something happened out of their control and they don't have a partner or, husband or a wife, and they're raising kids on their own? And
yeah, I think that was a big thing that made that put this perfect little wrapping around, here's how your family's supposed to look. And they made it sound really nice, but what's unfortunate is that's probably the minority of families who look that way, who have a mother and a father who stay married forever. The mother stays home and raises the kids, and the dad works full time. I'm sorry, life is not that simple anymore.
It's a lot stickier.
There's a lot more complicated things that go into life. So yeah, I just think anymore, that is such a minority.
Well, and it clearly excludes if you're gay, if you're in a relationship, you're raising children with a same-sex partner. Yes. It clearly states that is not within the bounds.
Yes.
So.
I don't know why this came up in my brain just now, but if you have not read the book by Carolyn Pearson called Goodbye, I Love You, you have to read it. Have you read it? You have to read it. It's a quick read. It's a short book.
Well, I've read some of her stuff and it's powerful.
Reading that,
her story is amazing.
And this is that book is her story.
Okay.
So it's all about her husband.
Yes.
And the AIDS epidemic and all of that. And the church really put their foot down about that stuff. And they just, because of the AIDS epidemic, guess what that did for the church? It gave them so much to say, look how bad gay people are.
Right.
Right.
This is like their punishment.
Yep.
Yep.
Sodom and Gomorrah. It was all this whole thing. And they couldn't have been happier.
Right.
About the AIDS epidemic. Yeah. I'm sorry, but So anyways, that whole story, if anybody hasn't read that book, you need to read it. It's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and life-changing all in one thing. It really changes your perspective on the way that gay people in the church have suffered, have literally suffered for generations because they cannot be what the church defines them as.
They don't fit the cookie cutter mold.
Yeah. So there's a few, I'm going to skip a little bit because I just have so much stuff here, but I'm going to skip a few quotes. But essentially with the Hawaii thing, the church just thought that they should intervene because it made a difference for their members of the church. And they thought that it would just ruin the world if gay marriage was legalized. There's a quote by, this is so funny. And James E. Faust, I loved him.
Yes.
I remember really loving him, but this quote
He reminded me of Captain Picard on Star Trek, The Next
Really?
Generation. Yeah, every time I saw him, I was like, oh,
that
Captain
is
Picard.
funny.
Anyways.
So this quote in 1995 is hilarious. He is stating about same-sex marriage that it would unravel the fabric of human society and if practiced by everyone would mean the end of the human family. This is another fear tactic.
Absolutely.
It's hard not to laugh, right?
Yes.
I mean, now that we see how many years have gone by since gay marriage has been federally legal across the entire country, 8-9 years or so. Has the fabric of society? No.
Life went on.
It went on. And in fact, I think it's better. So anyways, then this person says, as long as the First Amendment is in place, churches will never have to perform gay marriages. This was the thing that they were saying, if gay marriage is legal, then we're going to have to go against our religion and perform gay marriages.
Yes.
That is not true. And they also said that we wouldn't be able to teach against homosexuality. That's not true either. You can still teach against homosexuality at the podium because guess what? Religious freedoms are one of unless the First Amendment is taken away in the Constitution, that shit is never going to happen. So the church throwing that out there as a way to scare everybody, it's just a fear tactic to make people vote the way they wanted them to. He says, this is the freest society on earth for religious people. Protecting the rights of gay people will not change that. So I loved that. It's somebody needs to call out the bullshit. Yes. I call bullshit on all this stuff. It's going to ruin the world. Okay, so also in Alaska, the church donated $500,000 towards banning same-sex marriage there in 1998. That made up nearly 80% of the entire budget for the coalition lobbying for the ban of same-sex marriage.
They don't spare any expense when it comes to these things that they're really fired up about.
Right. And that same year,
and they have deep pockets. That's the thing.
Well, their members have deep pockets because they convinced them that this is the most worthy cause.
Right.
So they actually got members to donate a lot of this money.
Yes.
Too.
Well, like you said, the fundraisers.
Additional donations on top of tithing, right? That same year in 98, they fought it in Nebraska. They gathered 160,000 signatures to ban same-sex marriage in Nebraska. Nevada, that also happened in Nevada, raising money, getting petition signatures, all of that. Then in 1999, there was a Prop 22 in California. This was another one where they gave fundraising quotas to state presidents. A quote by President Hinckley, so-called same-sex marriage is not a matter of civil rights. It's a matter of morality. There's no justification to redefine what marriage is. Which is really funny because marriage wasn't even defined. It's not like we've had marriage defined since the beginning of time.
Right.
This is literally
I know, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's kind of a new idea.
They actually defined marriage for tax purposes.
Right, yes.
For political purposes. Yeah. So it's just funny to me.
A prophet of the church to say that? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine being a member of the church that trying to make it work and then hearing that I'm immoral now because of the way I was born. It just is
I don't deserve
harmful.
Civil rights because I'm immoral.
And at the time, we're paying tithing to support this. It makes me sick.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is. It's pretty rough. So In 2004, they endorsed a federal amendment to the United States Constitution, as well as the Utah Constitutional Amendment 3, banning any marriages not between one man and one woman. In 2004, Gordon B. Hinckley gave an interview in which he talked about, that he did not support same-sex marriage or civil unions. He also stated that gay people have a problem that the church wants to help them solve.
Right. We're going to fix you.
Yes.
It's a trial.
And then I don't know if he was specifically asked this question, but he said that he did not know if gay people were born that way.
You'd think that
which is
he could ask God, because God would tell him.
Yeah, he should have asked God. I don't know why he didn't. In 2005, the church published an article tying the term gender confusion to homosexuality, stating that if governments were to alter the moral climate by legitimizing same-sex marriages, gender confusion would increase, and particularly among children. And this would further blur the line between good and evil.
So now they've come up with a new term to scare us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a whole, somewhere in this time, there was a whole website that was sponsored by the church on married people that had, the wife, they knew the husband was gay.
Oh, yeah.
They got married and really tried to make it work because they believed the doctrine so firmly. And they came out and said, it's possible, you can do this, we're doing it. And then what happened a few years later, all those marriages started falling apart, and those couples came back and said, we're sorry.
Yeah.
We tried. It's not right. We shouldn't have said that. We apologize.
Yeah, and that's just a small little sampling of people.
Right.
They actually, thousands and thousands of people got married in mixed orientation marriages, meaning at least one of them was gay, right? Mm-hmm. And they married the opposite gender. So that's what happened with Carolyn Pearson. And her husband, he knew he was gay before they married. And he was given the advice from church leaders to go ahead and marry the opposite sex, and it will turn you straight.
Right. It's going to do all the things, check off all the boxes, and you're going to be fixed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine what that does to the wife or the spouse read
that book. That is all that she talks about.
That I just can't.
It's heartbreaking. She talks about how her husband loved her as well as he could.
Right.
But
probably like a best friend.
Yeah,
but
they were.
That's the same thing in the story I was reading about this couple. The wife said, I never felt passion from him. Mm-hmm. They were married 20 years. And she's like, I never felt wanted or desired. Yeah. He treated me well. I know he loved me.
Kind person.
But it wasn't that, it was a friend love.
And he probably loved her as a best friend.
And exactly. They did the best they could until they couldn't anymore. Yep.
So it just kept going on. The fear tactics, they said, oh gosh, here's another quote. In 2007, they said that if same-sex marriage were legalized, there would be no basis to deny polygamous or incestuous marriages. That's so interesting.
Oh my gosh.
So interesting.
Serious?
And a decreased ability to protect their children from exposure to gay propaganda.
Oh my gosh.
Again, fear-mongering, right?
Absolutely.
So, you just see, okay, we have a problem saying absolutely.
I say absolutely.
A lot.
Absolutely
so we're
too
really
much.
trying today to not say absolutely too much.
I'm failing.
She keeps catching herself. Now the big one was Prop 8. So this is the one. Mm-hmm, that was in 2008. They said that, same stuff, all kinds of fear mongering and stuff. They said that tolerance does not mean tolerating transgression, and that we shouldn't be tolerating people sinning.
When you hear the word tolerate, does that give you warm fuzzies?
No.
It's a negative term. No one wants to be tolerated.
Nobody wants to be tolerated.
No, thanks for tolerating me.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it. I mean, it's not a great place to be. Nobody wants to be there.
Absolutely. Yep. The church. So the entire campaign against gay marriage for Prop 8 raised nearly $40 million, and the church donated half of that. Okay. It actually passed. Okay. Oh, here's one thing. one of the church general authorities stated that members who oppose Prop 8 would be subject to discipline from their local church leaders. So now here comes threats.
Yes.
Not just fear-mongering, but now threats.
So not only should you support this, but if you don't support it, don't say anything.
Yeah, you cannot come out opposed to it,
right.
For sure.
Well, and even questioning is frowned upon, right? Don't even question it. No.
Yep. So this did pass in November, and the next day, over 2,000 protesters gathered at the Los Angeles LDS Temple. And the next day after that, nearly 5,000 protesters gathered at the Salt Lake Temple. And that evening, a candlelight vigil by about 600 mothers of LGBT children was also held at the Salt Lake Temple. So there was a lot of people that came out after the fact and were really pissed. But guess what? Prop 8 was later overturned in court because it was ultimately ruled unconstitutional.
Hooray! You wonder why there's so much hatred and dislike towards the church.
Towards the church. I know.
Well, this is a really good place to start. They discriminate against people. They say you were born wrong. If what you are is not okay with God.
But also we'll try to fix you.
Right. We can
have
fix
a solution.
You. Yes. Come on in.
Because you need to be fixed.
Right.
And here's the thing, like during all of this time that all of this was going on, it was only very barely in the background in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew about Prop 8 for sure.
Yes.
I knew about some little rumblings, but it was very much on the margin of, I don't think that regular church members were all that aware, unless maybe just because I was young, I wasn't that much aware. Maybe the older members of the church were more aware if they were more into the
I think unless you had a family member or close friend that it was impacting, it didn't impact you.
At that time, I didn't think that much about it, or I didn't know how much the church was involved or how much was going on with fighting gay marriage. So I read, as I was researching this is kind of interesting, and it may be a little anecdotal. We don't know how true it is. But during the years that Mitt Romney was running for president, the church stayed completely out of all of the gay rights legislation. Like during the time that he was running, Maine, Maryland, and Minnesota all approved gay marriage, and the church said nothing.
It was crickets from the church.
Nothing from the church.
Okay,
and as soon as he lost in 2012, they jumped right back in the ring and started fighting the next round of gay marriage legislation. Maybe.
I don't know.
Seems a little too coincidental, though, right? Yeah, because before he got in, they were fighting Nevada, Alaska, Hawaii, all the states that were trying to pass it, they were fighting. And then they just didn't say anything. What, do they don't care about those states? I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think that starting in about 2012, the church kind of started softening their words a little bit towards gay marriage. They became a little bit milder. Like their language seemed to kind of signal a little bit of resignation.
But they had
the
to.
Issue.
They had to.
Yes.
There was so much backlash.
Yeah.
Coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
At them. They had to do something. But they didn't want to. They didn't want to.
Oh, no, they did not want to.
No.
They were forced to. They've been forced to do everything they've ever done that was right?
It's true.
There was a quote from President Monson that said, "There's a shift in society that we can't stop.
Right.
But we can ask for exceptions." So, he knew it.
Right.
He knew that this was going down. So in December of 2013, right before Christmas, same-sex marriages became legally recognized in Utah. And we were not one of the last states to come around, which is really impressive.
Right.
But it was sort of a fluky thing because of a U.S. District Court, Robert Shelby. Thank the Lord for him. He struck down the Utah ban on same-sex marriage, saying that it violated the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. Within 2 hours of that happening, the first same-sex couple was married in Utah. They were both former Mormons. I love this so much. So in response to this, the church released instructions to leaders regarding same-sex marriage in Utah, and it stated that church leaders were prohibited from employing their authority to perform marriages, and that any church property could not be used for same-sex marriages or receptions. So just make sure you don't, if you're a bishop, you cannot perform a same-sex marriage. They just wanted to make sure that.
And don't let them do any kind of marriage stuff, like a reception or Heaven forbid.
Yeah. And it didn't take very long. Right at the beginning of 2014, the church filed an amicus brief in the 10th Circuit Court in defense of Utah's overturned amendment banning same-sex marriage. And they just basically summarized that, it went against their religious rights or whatever, and that it would affect them.
Well, they're going to throw anything they can at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have to still point out a couple of good things that they did. In 2015, they held a Fairness for All news conference supporting LGBT non-discrimination laws for housing and employment that would also protect religious individuals, of course. I mean, they have to do that too. But at that time, Elder Christofferson called for a balance between religious freedom and LGBT rights. There's a few different quotes where they just talked about maybe having some tolerance. It's so nice of them.
I hate that
to
word.
Tolerate, but they did start to become a little bit softer. In March of 2015, they released a public statement and employed its lobbyists to garner support for a proposed non-discrimination and religious rights bill, which would grant housing and employment protection for LGBT persons in Utah. So, I mean, that's one step in the right direction.
Right.
So we're thankful for that. It was nicknamed the Utah Compromise. So
compromise. That's another word that doesn't quite sit well.
Yep.
Because nobody's getting what
We're
they want,
compromising,
right? We're
yeah.
going to kind of give you a little bit, but
because their claim the entire time was that gay marriage would somehow stomp on their religious freedom.
right.
Which is not true.
It's just not
that
a thing.
was never in question.
Mm-mm.
Nobody ever said you can't practice your religion,
Mhm.
but they claimed that, and they are still fighting that. And we'll get to that. So in 2015, 3 days after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of same-sex marriage, so it was now legal in the entire country, the First Presidency sent a letter to be read to every congregation
And sacrament meeting.
affirming that just because the U.S. law changed does not mean that God's
law does not change.
God's law does not change.
Except
It
when
does
it
not
does.
change God's moral law, except when it does. And again, they
Except
clarified.
when he changes his mind.
Exactly. And again, in this letter, they clarified that bishops cannot perform same-sex marriages and they cannot happen anywhere on church property or their receptions. So that was in June of 2015. In November of 2015, an update to the church handbook was leaked. This was never meant for the public to see or hear about. This was in the leaders' church handbook, and
So only a certain group of people in the church would receive this.
Right.
Okay.
And it stated that members who were in a same-sex marriage would be considered apostates and would be subject to church discipline. Additionally, the children of parents who were in same-sex relationships had to wait until they were 18 years old to get baptized. And not just the age, but they also had to disavow homosexual relationships of their parents before they could be baptized.
This was a huge step that the church tried to push.
Yep.
And they're doing it saying, this is Jesus's church, and you got to follow these rules, and we're going to exclude people, and you can't get baptized until you disavow, and it's in Jesus's name. It's so offensive.
Yeah. And the fact that they tried to do it quietly and sneakily and not have anybody know about it, but it was leaked, really caused a huge uproar. I think within a few days, there were like thousands of members of the church that gathered at the church office building and submitted their resignation.
There was a mass resignation due to that specific.
Yep. And the ones that showed up at the church office building was only like maybe a quarter of the total number that resigned like online and through other means, but like huge mass they probably, I think within a year of that, I think I read a statistic that like I want to say close to 15,000 members resigned.
Yeah, it was big.
Their membership. It was a
statement made.
Number. Oh yeah. And I one of the things that just pisses me off about this is that they tried to make it seem like they were doing the children
a favor. Yes. They tried to put a spin on this.
Oh, yeah.
That was fantastically offensive.
Yes. They said, well, they need to wait till they're 18 because it might cause a rift in the home. It would, they wouldn't be learning the same things at home that they're learning at church, and that would cause a problem. Guess what? They never gave a damn about children who like in the mission field, when they would baptize a child, they had to have their parents' permission, of course.
Yes.
But they didn't care that their parents were not members of the church.
No.
They didn't care that what religion their parents were or what they were teaching in the home, whether they were alcoholics or abusive in any way. They didn't give a damn about that.
Where did this even come from? Like,
right?
What? Are they just sitting around looking for ways to make trouble and exclude
That's what it feels
people?
like, right?
I don't, like, who even comes up with this stuff?
I don't know. It really felt like they were trying to just exclude people.
And they're going to put a pretty bow on it so that we're doing them. We're trying to take care of them.
Yeah.
In the long run. But I can't imagine being a child, being raised in a loving home, whatever, same-sex parents, and, trying to be a part of this church. And then having that put in front of you.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. And the mental gymnastics it takes to make this sound like it was a positive thing is beyond me. Like, I just can't even with it. I can't.
Yeah.
So that was a shelf item for me, even though still at the time, I did not have any sort of intimate knowledge of what it was like to be gay or had any close relationships with gay people, but I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't fair. Right? That's not fair.
It's not fair.
But then I said to myself, well, they must know something that I don't know.
Yes. I don't have all of the pieces.
It's all this, like line upon line.
Yes.
We'll learn more, we'll understand this someday.
In the next life.
Maybe in the next life. We don't understand it now, but...
Yeah, it's all just bullshit to keep us in line.
Yeah. So they just kept on their insane ways for, they just keep going with it. Another thing happened with the Boy Scouts of America in 2017. They announced that transgender boys could join their troops. And the church basically said, oh, well, then we're probably going to pull out of the Boy Scouts.
I'm surprised the Boy Scouts would do that. Like
that they would allow transgender boys?
Well, they were already falling in line with what the church said.
Oh, yeah.
So they had to know what the church was going to do. So
yeah,
good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
But I just think, I'm like, ballsy move, man.
Yeah, it was a ballsy move. Now, of course, I don't have great feelings about the Boy Scouts of America because I've learned too much and read too much and heard too much about some of the corrupt things that have happened there. But so I don't necessarily want to defend them, but they were trying to be inclusive. Inclusive, yes. And
for kids.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah. So at that time, they didn't withdraw their support. But 4 months later they did, but they denied that it had any link.
Timing is everything,
to the
right?
transgender thing. Yeah.
Oh, please.
So let's see. The church presidency. In 2019, in April of 2019, Russell Nelson announced a new revelation, sort of reversing the November 2015 policy. Not really. Still saying that same-sex marriage was a transgression, but that they would not be called apostates.
This was a huge deal because which is it? You can't is it okay? Is it not okay? Why didn't God get it right the first time? Now we don't have to call them names, but we could call them names before. We could call them apostates.
Right. And what's so funny is that they characterized it as revelation the first time around. So, how did you get the revelation wrong?
God got it wrong. Were you not listening? Like, did you get a good night's sleep? And were you alert and awake when God was talking to you?
Yeah. And he actually said it was our privilege as apostles to sustain what had been revealed to President Monson. And he's talking about that 2015 policy. But then shortly after the change, people are asking, like, what the heck? And he said, The reversal was revelation upon revelation.
Oh, please. Dude, they can spin anything, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it shouldn't be this complicated.
Yeah.
To be a member of Jesus's church, the only true church, right? True church. It's so complicated. Oh my goodness.
And the only people with authority to speak for God, too. Nobody else can speak for God. So why are they speaking wrong?
Yeah, how'd you get that wrong?
Or they couldn't be. They couldn't possibly.
But they're saying it's not wrong.
Right.
It's just additional. Which, have you heard that before? Is that how? I don't know. That's a new one.
I've never heard that before.
That's a new one.
And then I think starting in 2019, at least that's what I found. There may have been earlier things, but where they really started to come down on transgender.
Right. Things. Yes. It's like the next thing to focus on. They started
to make statements about, that gender means biological sex at birth, and that, you can't change that. And our knowledge of God's revealed plan of salvation requires us to oppose this, social and legal pressure and, all this kind of stuff.
This is coming from the top,
yes,
the top
this
leaders
is from
of
President
the church.
Oaks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said this, this confuses and alters gender, confuses people, and it makes it so there's no separation between men and women. I kind of think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
why does gender have to be so defined?
That's because the church is black and white. Yes. It is so black and white. They can only have it one way.
Yep.
And it's got to be their way.
Yep. And I remember this specific talk. It was in General Conference of 2019. My daughter, in the fall, and my daughter had come out as gay in like May-ish of that year. And so that was the first conference since that. And I sat through that talk and I bawled through the entire thing. And this was a huge weight on my shelf. This was, it pissed me off.
Well, what does that leave you with if you have a family member, a daughter, a son? Yeah. Like, what are you supposed to take from that?
Yeah. And I was honestly, I was really trying to make the church still work at that point. And I was just looking for any sort of comfort and peace. And instead what I found was them slamming the door in my face saying, you don't belong here.
Right.
If you accept your daughter as she is, you're wrong. And the church doesn't agree with it.
Yeah. There's not really a place here for you.
Yeah.
We'll tolerate you. But it's just not going to work out until you fix those problems.
Yeah. And one of the most recent ones was in June of 2020, there was a Supreme Court case over discrimination in the workplace. And the court actually ruled 6-3 in the decision for gay rights, for equality in the workplace. And the church participated in this one too. Of course, they were part of an amicus brief stating that if they, as an employer, were required to not discriminate based on sexual orientation or gender identity, it would threaten their religious liberty. And they just want the right to discriminate when they're hiring people. So as an employer, that's what it was addressing. So at this time, this was really funny because, first of all, it happened in June, which is Pride Month. This happened during the pandemic, right? My daughter and I I had left. I had officially, mentally, I was out. But my daughter was still trying to stay, right, at this point. And so her birthday's in May. And so the bishop had called her in for like her birthday interview. And I told her that I would go with her if she wanted me to. And she said, no, I want to talk to him by myself. I'm good. She's like, I've got some questions for him. Well, she came home after and she told me that she asked him because she knew about this Supreme Court case. She said, Bishop, I still love the church and I want to be a part of it, but I need to know something. And he said, what is that? And she said, I need to know if my tithing money is going towards lawsuits and Supreme Court cases that fight against my rights. And the bishop was just like speechless. He literally didn't know what to say. He said to her, well, I'll have to look into that and I'll get back to you. He never got back to her. So she never paid another dime of tithing. But it's just,
what I picture in my mind is a general conference where Jesus gets up to the podium and he says, I love you all, but if you're gay, this is a trial. You need to read your scriptures more, pray more, and fix yourself, or you can't be with me. You can't come back. That's not the Jesus Christ that I grew up, that I love, that I learned about.
Yeah.
He's not about exclusion.
Yeah.
He's about everyone come on in. We've all got our faults. We've all got our things we're working on. Come on in, let's help each other.
Yeah.
But the church is not set up that way.
Yeah.
Especially for this, they really, really dug their heels in. And I honestly think there's no turning back for them at this point.
Yeah.
They can't really soften much more. So to me, after, like, they're going to just keep losing members because of this central issue. Because everyone, how many of us know someone who is, or loves someone who is gay? I don't know if
there's anyone who doesn't know someone who's gay, right?
So Jesus is saying, you're excluded. You can do everything right. You can be the best person in the world, kind, giving.
But if you want love.
Right, but if you try to love someone that, and have a family and you're same sex, you've just, you've lost your salvation, right? Is that what I'm getting?
Oh, yeah.
So Jesus is stepping up and saying, you're okay because you're a man and
you're straight.
Yeah, you're a man and a woman married. But you're not okay because you're gay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is really interesting because back in, from I'll just say 1850, I don't know the year, but from 1850 until 1978, Jesus was standing up and saying that people of color were not okay. And that they couldn't go to the temple. They couldn't have the priesthood. They couldn't be sealed. So therefore, that also means that they cannot have salvation, right?
True. If you can't get to the temple, how are you supposed to? Yeah.
Right. So the parallels are fascinating because can you imagine if they had not given Black people the priesthood back in 1978, the church would be obsolete at this point. Yeah. Like, nobody would belong to the church.
Right.
And I think this is the same thing.
Yeah. It is.
It's another issue, but it's the same type of thing where if the church does not back down on this issue, the church will be obsolete in 15 years. I really think they will.
It's straight up discrimination.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they'll just stop saying anything and just let it happen. Just let it go to maintain this.
Either that, or can you imagine, one day in general conference, sorry, but it'll have to be when Rusty's gone.
I know, right?
And Oaks. Oaks has to be gone too.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a chance after that. I don't know. For them to come up to the podium and say, we received a new revelation, and isn't it glorious?
Right. They'll put a spin on it.
They'll say, we've been praying, we've been hoping and praying, and now gay people can get married in the temple. Can you imagine?
I just don't think that. I mean, I just can't see it ever happening with this.
I can't either because they've been so digging in their heels about it.
I think people would see right through it if they tried to allow it.
Yeah.
I think they might tolerate it, exclamation mark,
Yeah.
But I don't see them being able to get away with it.
The only way that they could is to really sell the idea that the church is still being restored and that we're still receiving revelation upon revelation,
if anyone could put a spin on it, they could.
They'll figure it out.
They would,
I don't think they will. I don't think they'll ever be okay with it unless we have a really progressive leader at some point, I don't see anybody being.
The stance they've taken has been so extreme. They've taken it so far that how could they backpedal now?
Yeah, I don't.
And not lose. They're stuck, and I think that's going to be their downfall.
Well, and I even see them digging in their heels more in the last since Rusty came along, than before. I mean, Gordon B. Hinckley and Monson, they said little things here and there.
Right.
But it feels like it's way more.
He's harsh.
He is.
Yeah, I think he's harsh.
He's like a podium, puncher. He's just like, this is how it is. And I think Oaks is the same way. And he's coming up next after him. But so we mentioned at the beginning of the episode the talk that Jeffrey Holland gave last August or whatever about he was actually just addressing the faculty and staff at BYU.
Yeah.
And he was basically getting pissed at them for having any sort of acceptance and tolerance towards gay
people.
And he's like, we need to be fighting against this a lot stronger. You cannot have rainbow flags in your rooms or in your offices, and you can't have, you can't be supporting LGBTQ rights.
Wasn't there something about teachers had pictures of Jesus and not the prophet?
Oh my gosh!
And he was saying, somewhere along the line that has happened.
Oh my gosh!
Where it's like, where's the pictures of the prophet? Where's the first presidency?
Yeah. In fact, I do know a story similar to that. I don't know if that
the
has
seminary
to do with
teacher.
The seminary teacher.
Yeah.
He took down the pictures of the first presidency and put up pictures of Jesus. Lots of pictures of Jesus, and he got in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, how dare we worship Jesus?
Mm-hmm. But back to Holland.
Yeah.
His talk was full of violence. It was. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, he
called for musket fire.
Yes, it's just it. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't translate for what Jesus would say.
Right?
What he say?
Jesus I thought I knew.
I just want them to get up there and give Jesus your talk that you're just reading, Elder Holland.
Yeah.
And let him give it. Because you're speaking, right? That's what you told us. That's what we know, that you're speaking for God. So Jesus is going to get up there and say, musket fire.
Yeah, we need a little more musket fire in defending marriage.
We got it, yes. What do you picture when you hear that? A battle, a war.
Uh-huh.
Why does it have to be a war, us against them?
I don't know. It's
messed up.
So bad. And this talk was given within days. I can't remember if it was before or after. A lesbian couple was murdered in Moab, Utah.
Oh,
yep,
wow.
That happened the same week.
I didn't know that.
Yep, murdered in Moab, Utah for being gay.
Right.
I wonder where those ideas come from. Killing people who are different.
Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus clearly wants that.
Jesus. I just don't know how we have the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the prophets will never lead you astray. I want you to go back and have Jesus read some of these talks over the podium at General Conference that they've given.
Yeah.
That exclude people, that are discriminatory. It's just I bet Jesus is offended.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So this is such a big issue for me. If you want to learn more about some of the ways that the church has changed its stance on gay people, read Gay Rights in the Mormon Church by Greg Prince. That's a really good book. And it basically goes over a lot of the stuff I've talked about today. It's just mind-blowing to me that it really feels like they're just talking out of their asses half the time. They're just clearly their own bias is playing a role.
Well, and it's church versus state. Why are they in the legislature?
Why are they messed in politics?
And what's even crazier is they have so much money, they can make change.
Oh, they've had a huge control over the Utah laws for as long as Utah's
That's
been a
obvious.
state.
I mean, that is a fact.
Right? And we just know that we're never going to be free of it because there's too many politicians in Utah who are Mormon. And it's just... So that's never going to change. And that's frustrating to me because really the lines between church and state are so blurred. It's never going to, I don't know if that's ever going to be better. But for me, seeing how wrong the church has been on the gay issue is the biggest reason why I lost all my faith in their authority and their ability to speak for God.
Right.
And the fact that they were, the only people who had authority to speak for God. It's just nope. That's bullshit. I don't believe it anymore.
No.
I reject that concept. And so that's kind of when that came about. Yeah. Was basically learning how wrong they are on the gay issue. I know they're wrong.
Right. I think there's a lot of people who are active in the church who are really struggling with this one.
Yes. Yes, there are.
Maybe they have a child that is gay or, a family member or neighbor that they love and adore. But as far as Jesus is concerned, you don't get to live with him because of that.
Yeah, and I remember before my daughter came out, years and years before, I knew a few people that came out. I had a nephew and a cousin and things like this, and I kept seeing that kids who were gay, their parents kept leaving the church. And I was like, that's so weird to me. Why did they need to leave the church, or why did they lose their testimony just because they have a gay child? Well, now I understand.
Now you get it.
Because it crumbles when you recognize that you cannot support your child and also support a church who fights against them.
You can't.
Once you recognize that there's no middle ground here.
It will destroy you if you try to do that.
Yes, and it almost did. Like, I literally spent every Sunday crying. And in Relief Society, you don't realize how much this issue comes up and how hurtful the things are that they say about it.
The church is all about families are forever.
Yeah.
And they are the only ones that know the plan to get you back so that you can all live forever. So when you have a child come out as gay, game over.
Yeah.
Right?
Your family can't
You can try to fix them.
Yeah.
But if they decide to have an authentic, healthy, loving relationship and be themselves for the rest of their lives, then you enjoy them now because they're not going to be with you.
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
Totally. And there was no way that I could convince myself that, loving my daughter could work and fully embracing her.
So you have to make a choice.
There might be a tolerance of her.
Right. Is that enough? Are you okay with that?
No. I was never okay with that.
So you got to make a choice. Do you love the church more, or do you love your daughter more?
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. So then you can see why people are leaving.
And it's never, put in those words, like you've got to choose.
Not.
And I do think there's a lot of people who are really
trying to make it work. Yes, bless their hearts.
Yes, they really are. They're trying to love their kid and be supportive, and they're also trying to stay in the church.
It has to be just so
it's
painful.
Heartbreaking. Yeah, it really is painful because it's just ripping you in two, and I couldn't do it anymore. I just think, and so for all of those reasons, it's just like, well, the church. That the prophet does not speak for God.
No.
I can't accept that as truth.
And once that's gone,
it's all gone.
Yeah,
right. It all crumbles.
Yeah, it's gone.
So yeah, that I keep hoping that things might get better, only for the sake of people who are trying, who are in the church. For their sake, I want them to feel some peace and happiness.
There's such goodness that happens in the organization, the church, the wards. There is. It's great people. There's so much goodness, but we have to take the blinders off and really recognize that there is some really hurtful, damaging
doctrine.
Yes, that's taking place.
That's still being taught, and I wish that it felt like people in the church could make a difference. Because I believed that at one time. I thought that we could make a difference.
I think they have. No, I think they have, like the what was the prop in 2018 where children could not get baptized until they're 18 if they lived with.
Yes.
2 years later, that was reversed. And there was a huge uproar from.
That's true.
So I think that
maybe
they are
able to make the difference,
making a difference. But I don't think it's going to be enough.
Yeah, maybe not. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because I really believe that if they do not change significantly, the church will be obsolete in 15 years.
Our generations have changed too much. Our mindset is not the same as it was in 1960.
Yep.
But, coming back to what David said, church can be a great place to be. You can find friends and support and your community there. You can learn about Jesus. There is so much goodness. Yeah. You can feel great feelings that I would have called the Spirit. It's coming from the people. It's coming from, it's not. There are a lot of good people in the church that really have, like, honest to goodness, the best intentions. Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And once you don't have the prophet who you thought was the one you're supposed to do everything he says, once you know that that's not truth, all you are left with is yourself. And guess what? That's all you need. Yeah. That's all you need. I'm having to learn that now. It's tricky. Yeah, it's tricky. In fact, I think we should do a whole podcast episode about that, because I think the church ingrains in us from a very early age that we can't trust ourselves. Yeah, it's true. That we need to trust. Doubt your doubts. I mean, it's that Dorf talk. Always in my head. Yep. But learning to trust yourself, just trust yourself. Like,
Yeah.
you can figure it out.
Yeah.
You got this.
That's honestly what got me to where I'm at now, is that for just a split second, I realized that I could trust myself. And it's like, well, that changes everything.
That you still are unlearning a lot of this
you
stuff.
still have to unlearn. Oh,
but it's so nice when you start to shed all of that. So.
Yeah. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
It's probably been a really long episode. I do want to say again that if you're enjoying our content and you like listening to this series, go to dissidentdaughters.org, and in the menu bar, there's an option to donate. You can sign up for a reoccurring donation, even just $5 a month. It would be amazing. You can also donate at mormondiscussionspodcast.org, and you can select Dissident Daughters under that umbrella, and you can donate directly to us. So if you like our content,
go Ada, go Esther. We love doing this. This is fun.
And Bill likes us.
And we like Bill.
We love Bill. Bill Real is the Mormon Discussions podcast, and he has made it possible for us to do this. So we really love and appreciate him, and he's giving us so much good feedback, and we're loving this. This has been a lot of fun. So we are going to try to not have such a long break in between this one and the next one, but like we've said before, we have busy, crazy lives, but we're trying.
That's
we'll
all
keep the content coming.
Keep trying.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep trying to put more content out. So
give us some feedback. Let us know what you think.
Yeah. And if you have any ideas for topics that you want us to cover, we have a few planned, but we are always open.
We're fluid.
We are open to suggestions, questions, comments, feedback. But only if you have nice things to say. Just teasing. All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
See you next time.